children in general, I think it benefits them to be in a situation where things are so real, right? So when you say no or stop on a boat, it's a very real danger. It's a very tangible threat, and children understand that.
I'm so excited to bring you this interview today with the charming Marissa Evans, who's not only a sailor herself with thousands of nautical miles behind her, but also a single mom with four kids who made the decision to pursue sailing in most aspects of her life, moving aboard a 37-foot boat with her kids. Not only is her story amazing, but she also participates in the Women Who Sail groups and wants to help other women get into sailing and help parents with kids answer the tough questions that they may have about living on a boat. This one's going to be fun. Know each other because of Todd, who we're both friends with on Facebook, and I went and stayed on his boat on his massive Hans Christian 43 in Annapolis a couple years ago. And you know Todd too. Is that how you got started sailing? Is it like from other people?
Yeah, I sort of well, I grew up sailing. My parents always owned boats. We always lived close to the Chesapeake Bay, and so my parents started with like tiny little trailer sailors and then worked their way up to a Oyster 37. And then we cruised full time on that for I think 3 years. And did a couple of trips to Bermuda. So I've been to Bermuda several times, but only as a child. So the reason Todd and I connected was I was looking for crew opportunities, and he had said he wanted to maybe do the Bermuda race. Um, so he kind of offered that as a crewing option. And then we just sort of became friends, and he wanted to cruise and wasn't sure about single handing, and he kind of wanted to give me and the kids a chance to experience cruising. And so it was just kind of like a mutual, let's try this.
I've been following you since back then on Facebook, and you're like swimming with dolphins and riding horses and like doing all this crazy stuff. And then I was like, whoa, wait a minute, she moved on to a boat. Like, how did this happen?
Yeah, I kind of when I got divorced, I moved away from horses. I actually got really lucky because I lost my farm lease in 2019 and I was just devastated. I thought, my life was over. I had the lesson business and horses and it was my whole life. Um, and I couldn't make it work after I lost the land lease. So I kind of sold everything and ended up being such a blessing because there's no way I could have floated, the horses and the farm through COVID. So that was just such a period of change for me. And then I got a divorce somewhere in there. And post divorce, I just kind of like, I felt like I hadn't spent any time thinking about what I really wanted to do. It was always just like kind of working and making ends meet and trying to survive. So I was trying to think of like what I liked because I didn't want to go back into horses. And I remember really liking sailing and like most of my really good memories were sailing. So I thought I'd try that. And that's kind of where Todd and the Hans Christian came in. And we cruised from Baltimore to Bimini and back this in 2024. And when we came back, we mutually knew that we were going to part ways, but I didn't want to go back to living in Delaware because there's not like a sailing community there at all. Um, and my fairy godparents are here. I cruised with them when I was a kid as well, so they've known me since I was 6 years old and they've been huge mentors here. And then I ended up talking to Jerry Littell at Evolution Sales, who became a friend and a mentor. And I was like, look, I will do anything if you will hire me. I will sweep your floors, I'll pick up your dry cleaning, whatever. And he's just such a great person, He was just like, oh, absolutely, but we're gonna teach you how to make sales. I think you need to do that. Yeah, so it's just a really cool opportunity. So that was like the deciding factor. I was kind of like, okay, no matter what, I'm gonna make it work so I can stay here in Deltaville. And I wasn't really looking for a land life, so I kind of knew I was going to look for a boat. So I found a early 90s Jeanneau Sun Odyssey, which is the three cabin charter version. So there's plenty of room for the kids and I. So we're just living the dock condo life now.
No doubt. It's a 37, you said?
Yeah, it's the Sun Odyssey 37.1, which was the first charter edition, but I think LOA is something like 39.
It's not a ton of boat. And you said you have kids. How many kids? How old are they? Like, cause like I think the big angle here is like people, there's so many cruisers that I talk to are like, how do you do it with kids? How do you homeschooling and like, cause they're traveling, right? And there's so many questions around how do you get kids to live on a boat comfortably and like be happy and all that stuff. So like how many kids, how old are they and how's that working?
Okay. So I have four children that I have full-time custody of. They are ages 10, 8, 6, and 4. And when we were cruising, I was homeschooling them and just doing kind of casual tutoring in the areas that they really needed it. Being that I grew up as a boat kid, I can say, like, with confidence, the happiness comes from kind of the priorities that your parents have. So my parents really prioritize meeting up with other boats with kids. I know Kids for Sale is like a massive resource these days for parents who want to connect kids. And then with Starlink and internet, I mean, it's just so much easier than it was. We were radioing around. Anybody got kids, you know? So it's just so much easier now to build a network before you even leave the dock, which is great. Um, but I would say uh, the kids adapt really well. Um, Children in general, I think it benefits them to be in a situation where things are so real, right? So when you say no or stop on a boat, it's a very real danger. It's a very tangible threat, and children understand that. And so it leads to a little bit more mutual respect and a little bit better communication between the parent and child. I don't think like the whole issue of how do you do it is kind of a non-issue. You just do, just like everything else with parenting. It's parenting is hard no matter where you do it. But I think things like farm life and boat life are really, really good for kids because it gives them a kind of um, confidence in themselves. It gives them a level of exposure, but just that level of being in touch and kind of feet in the dirt mentality, like when you're told no or stop on a boat, it really is your personal safety in it, and they get a sense of how small they are. We all do, I think, on a sailboat.
We do. We do. I like some footage comes to mind for me when I was out cruising. There were these kids on this catamaran, and it wasn't a big cat. It wasn't like a big Lagoon 440 or something. It was a smaller cat. And these kids spoke English and Spanish. And they're like running up and down the beach, playing with their dog, and like it was just like the magic of childhood but in an unfiltered, unmitigated kind of way because they're just out there in the world and they're like interacting with people on the beach that only speak Spanish and I have no idea what they're talking about. And I would watch those kids once in a while and I was just like fascinated by how much of a life they have that I didn't get to have because I wasn't a boat kid, right? So
Yeah, well, as a boat kid, I think play is such a universal language. I had friends that were French, I had friends that were Spanish, I had German friends that spoke no English, and it really didn't matter. Being a kid on a boat, you were just so excited to see another kid, you just made it work. Um, but I think, like I said, there's a lot more families cruising now, and the internet, I think, makes it a lot easier now. But yeah, you're right. I think it's such a good life for them. It kind of teaches them more simple joys and obviously like space constraints. You're not collecting a lot of stuff. They're getting away a little bit from the materialism and I think it's a good life.
so your boat, I guess speaking of space, do they all kind of claim their own independent corner of the boat? Like how's it work out? Or is there any like infighting over territory?
No, we don't really have. My kids are probably unique in some way. Like even when I had a 2,700 square foot house with my ex-husband, like they'd all pile into the same room. They've always been kind of like puppies. They're close in age, and I've always encouraged them to cooperate and communicate. I don't referee their conversations or their disputes. Like they're expected to have a relationship and maintain it. Obviously, it's not perfect. But one of the great things about being on this boat is that it is a three cabin boat. So my son, who's getting to that age, now has kind of more of his own space. And he's such an easy boat kid. He has like 10 treasured possessions and that's it. And he keeps them organized. And as long as he gets internet every once in a while, like he's pretty happy. The girls have had a pretty big adjustment with stuff because my girls like to have a lot of things. And so we've kind of transitioned from having a bunch of toys to having more like craft things, like activity kinds of things, drawing and painting and that kind of thing. Takes up less space and keeps them busy longer, where they get bored with items very quickly.
I have a feeling you could probably write a column for Practical Sailor like weekly on like tips for having your kids on a boat or like just there's so much to
Yeah.
discover, I think, for new parents that are like, we want to do the boat thing, or new sailing parents that they want to know how this all works. I guess if you could give those people some advice before they buy the boat, before they move onto the boat, as they're prepping the kids, what would you tell them? What would you tell yourself?
That's a really good question. I have such a unique perspective on this because my parents took it so seriously. Both of my parents took captain's courses. Like I was on a boat from toddlerhood. We did multiple races to Bermuda to get ocean time before we moved full time on the boat. My parents took a lot of time explaining to me like what it would look like and what the expectations were. And we did a lot of practice time on the boat. And so I was kind of prepared from a very young age to live this life. And I never really had a bunch of stuff anyway. I'm a reader, so I've always had just a lot of books. So I was okay with that. Um, so that's one way to do it is to be just really on top of preparing a child. Um, the way I did it was just in a moment of absolute like why the heck not? And just tossed everybody into it. And I think it works because of the way that I've parented. I think some kids would probably struggle with that, but I've always encouraged my kids to be really independent, and we've always had to be a team. Just with our circumstances in life and the struggles we've faced, we've always had to be very careful to work together. And so I had no issues, even though I really tossed my kids into it with really not a whole lot of warning. I mean, we did probably 3 weeks of practice trips all combined over a summer, and that was it. Like that was their only introduction to boat life. And then it was kind of like, all right, we'll try it with the understanding that, we had a place to come back to and we could always say it didn't work. Um, if I had to give advice, what I think is really two things that are really important. Number one is swimming lessons. Like drown proof your kids. That is the most important thing you can do. And if your kid cannot swim, they are wearing a life jacket all the time and you don't take your eyes off of them. I know there's been a few tragedies with boat kids. I would say if you've got a younger child that can't swim, like get a door alarm. Do everything in your power. Get a camera. Like make sure that they know where they're not allowed to go. And just you have to be vigilant because that's just such a devastating way to lose a kid and it's totally preventable. Um, so as much swimming lessons and that kind of get your kids really comfortable in the water. Because there are going to be times where that's really, really helpful. Um, even my 4-year-old from age 2 could dive under the water,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
not saying that I had anything to do with that. I think she was just born a fish. But all of my kids have been in swim lessons since they were very young, and I will say that had a lot to do with my comfort level taking them on the trip, because um, just the survivability of an incident goes up dramatically when you have strong swimmers. The other mistake that I think a lot of people make when they try to move kids on a boat is they wait too long. People think it's going to be really hard to have young kids on a boat. But I would argue, like, once you hit the teenage years, if you haven't established a community somewhere, you're going to have a lot harder of a time. The kids are going to be less flexible about it, and they're just not going to have as much fun. You know, ages 4 to 10, what I've got now is the perfect age. They're still full of wonder. They're not really talking back too much yet, although I'm sure it's coming. Um, and they're just, everything is an adventure at those ages. And I think it's intimidating, right? Because younger kids need so much attention and maintenance, and then you're also trying to sail a boat. Um, but I will say children understand more than we give them credit for. And when they're on a boat and it's not familiar to them, you have the advantage of a safety aspect to say, like, the things that I ask you to do are important for your safety and for our safety. And that takes a lot of the conflict out of it, I think. Um, so, yeah, I think don't wait too long and really, really, rather than putting your kids on the boat a lot, I would probably focus more on comfort in the water, like swimming, kayaking, just giving the kids options to move through the water and get really comfortable with it, because ultimately the boat is going to be home kind of non-negotiably anyway. So even though I had a ton of prep time on the boat, I can't necessarily say I remembered or really appreciated any of it because it was different being on there full time.
What I just out of curiosity from my own experience, crossing borders. So did they came with you to Bimini?
Yes.
What was that like at the border? Is there anything special that people with kids need to know as they arrive in the Bahamas specifically, but new countries?
I don't think so. You just have a family size consideration. Like the Bahamas, it costs more money because I have four children. So we were over whatever minimum size. I think it's three people or something, and then you move up a class. Children are kind of considered like non-crew travelers. So when they're children, you don't really have to worry about like you do with crew members, where you have to have like a departure date or a plan. I didn't run into any issues. I don't remember my parents having any issues. Of course, they only had me. Um, but I don't think there's any real considerations. I will say health wise, there are vaccinations and preventative medications that are recommended, especially for children, for things like malaria, and diseases that are largely eradicated here, but that you might be exposed to in the Caribbean. Like when I was sailing with my family, we made it all the way down to Venezuela, so exposure levels were pretty high. So that might be the only thing that kind of changes with kids, is just maybe a little bit more health vigilance. Um,
What about medical supplies? I imagine you had a pretty good first aid kit for this.
Yeah, I had a pretty supportive pediatrician, and I kind of explained to her what boat life looked like, and I kind of said, whatever you're comfortable with providing would be appreciated. So we had things like antibiotics. You can get amoxicillin in a dry form, so it has a longer shelf life. We had inhalers, rescue inhalers, and then just like whatever prescription medications the children had been on or had needed in the last year, I just got a refill of them and just kept them on hand in case they needed them. Like especially ear infection stuff, because obviously they're swimming a lot. That was used. I used all of that. Um, but I don't think. I mean, honestly, cruising life is so much healthier. They're not coming home with so many bugs and germs from school, and arguably less chances to get hurt, unless they're swinging from the rigging. So I didn't have any health issues or anything. I didn't do anything other than just keep what I would have kept in the house. Obviously, overall, like on any boat, you want to have like some kind of, blood stopping agent, maybe a tourniquet or whatever, like just the basic stuff that you're going to have for anybody on a boat. For any kind of blue water cruising, you need to have a pretty comprehensive medical kit. So I wouldn't say anything extra necessarily for children, unless your child has allergies or has a specific need. Um, but there are companies that do that too, like travel medicine companies that can help you manage that.
I found my doctor too when I went to him before leaving. I explained what I was doing, and the doctor seemed to be pretty on board with it. Like he wrote me all kinds of prescriptions. It was like, take this with you, it lasts a long time, take this, get some sutures, take this. And I left with
Yeah.
like a stack of prescriptions, and I ended up getting probably half of them for, like you said, antibiotics and all that kind of stuff, and steroid creams and inhalers and that. So I still have them somewhere. I'm sure they're all expired now.
Oh no.
So
Yeah.
what do you think's next? Like what's is there a grand plan or are you just kind of going with the breeze?
I think right now the pipe dream is to sort of work uh for land-based, or at least marina-based, for a year or two, and then try to cruise short term, 6 months or whatever. The ultimate sustainability of cruising full time is difficult, obviously, being a single parent with four kids. Um, but it is a really affordable lifestyle the way housing is. So I think it's really nice. I can take a job tomorrow in Florida working with manatees and just take my house and my kids with me. So it's nice to have the flexibility. I don't know what's next. I'm really, really enjoying my job learning sailmaking, and I think it's a good fit for me right now, just trying to stay immersed in sailing and learn more. I'm considering looking into getting a captain's license. I have just about enough miles now, I think, offshore. I reached that in 2024. So one of the big things that I think is really important to me right now is to try to help advocate for women in sailing because there are so many, I've met so many couples where the man is very confident and adept on the boat and is really enjoying the experience, where the woman is sometimes very insecure or very concerned. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for women to see other women sailing and sailing well and being confident and knowledgeable. So I think um, eventually I might get brave enough to kind of share more of my story, and I think it will hopefully help some women feel like there's nothing really holding them back from being just as empowered and just as confident on the boat. But I would love to see that turn into maybe a class or a forum or just a discussion or a support group of some kind where you can really dive into what it means to be a woman on a boat. You know, if I go to the store with my boyfriend, they're talking to him, you know, nobody speaks to me, and they're always shocked at how much knowledge I've really collected over the years. So I would love to see that boat rocked, figuratively and literally. I'd like to see people look at women in more serious light, and I think it's an important conversation to start to have, honestly.
Any advice to women looking into getting into sailing? I guess is it the same? So when I have younger men come to me and say, and this happens a lot, where they say, how do I get into sailing without spending $50,000 or something? What's the right way to do it? And I always give them that advice of like, go join a club as a crewing member and get on
Hmm.
board, bring a six pack and a life jacket, and offer to show up. The
Yeah,
best advice I have for them is commit to whatever race night is, commit for the next year. If it's Thursday, our club is Thursday. And I always say, make sure every Thursday for the rest of the year that you have absolutely no other plans. Because if I have to train somebody new on your position every third week, I don't want you. So,
yeah.
what is there advice you have for specifically to women?
Sure. I would say almost the same advice as you. Race captains actually really appreciate having women crew members. You'll find some that are still kind of subscribing to women are bad luck or more trouble than they're worth, but more and more of them, and the smart ones, realize that women are very organized and sometimes listen to instructions slightly better. And women are in general fairly collaborative, and I think that a lot of captains have found value in that. And there are a lot more female captains. There's a nice group called Women Who Sail that I think is at least national, if not international at this point. So if the comfort level is not really there or the confidence level is not really there, I can't promise there won't be any mistreatment in the sailing community. It still is a little backwards in some areas. Like I said, I've been treated in many different ways. In the winter, I'm very white passing. In the summer, I'm very Puerto Rican looking. I've had people be very dismissive. Um, so if you don't have the uh, initial confidence, maybe it might be worth looking for a woman captain who is going to be become a mentor and be more accepting, and then you don't have to deal with that right off the bat. Because I think if you can go in on a more challenging situation and feel sure of your skill set, it's not as much of an obstacle.
Yeah.
Because I think it'd be very easy to become discouraged like immediately if you're treated that way. But I have the luxury of having a lot of boat time and a lot of boat experience, and I say kind of the right words, and then people leave me alone. So
No doubt. We have like where I sail is not like an international hub of any kind. I'm fairly close to Detroit and Toledo, and a lot of racing on the Great Lakes, and I can say for sure there is a lot of female captain boats or all female crew boats. And there's one in particular, I don't want to embarrass her by saying her name on YouTube, but she's got an S2 all female crew, and that
nice.
S2 is unstoppable. They're at one end of Lake Erie, and if they're out there, don't even bother. Like as soon as the kite comes up on that boat, I stop trying because there's no competition. They will destroy you. Like they're just so fast. And I think if there's that here, like near Toledo and Detroit, I think you'll find that anywhere. I think you can find an all-female race boat or at least a female captain, mostly female crew.
Yeah, and even if you couldn't find it, there's nothing to say you couldn't start it. I mean, I think the kind of people who get into sailing are generally very friendly and open-minded and collaborative kinds of people. So even if you couldn't find that right off the bat, I think it's something that would be easy to develop. I'm talking to my fairy godmother about it. They're kind of trying to start something at their marina for advocating and empowering young women on boats or spouses that get on a boat and kind of feel like they're along for the ride. There's so many safety concerns with that, but also like they deserve to enjoy the trip too. Even if sailing is not your passion and you're doing it to be supportive, just at a base like safety level, I think something like a good how to be a really good first mate uh, course where you're being not judgmental and giving people options and giving them some tools in their toolbox would be a really great addition to the sailing education that's out there. I'm sure I've seen a little bit of it, but it's more on videos than like more formal courses. So that's something that I'm kind of interested in as I learn more, trying to help out with for sure.
If ever there comes a time where you want to write regularly for Practical Sailor, let me know because I think
I'm there. I'll do
just
it.
this conversation will strike a chord with not only the crowd that wants to get on boats with their kids, but also the women who want to captain their own boat, and then also the huge population of women who are just along for the ride, like you said,
Yeah.
and could really benefit from a lot of the knowledge that's out there, but maybe they don't know where to find it or something.
Well, I think it's also more relatable coming from a woman who's also a mother. I mean, just to be empowered enough to be told you don't have to choose. Like you can still be a woman and a wife and a mother and be totally competent and confident and capable and be treated with respect. Like those things are not exclusive. You don't have to be a doormat or an accessory. And yeah, I think that's great. I think people I think it's time to have the conversation. I think it's a good time. And coming from somebody who's in the position with kids, mostly doing it by myself, I've done a lot of solo sailing. I think it's just really, really relatable, and hopefully people will feel like it's not that far away. It's not that far of a reach for the average person.
That's Marissa Evans. And while she doesn't have her own YouTube channel I can link you to, what I will ask is that if you have anything for Marissa, leave a comment below this video. Whether it's appreciation for what she's doing or maybe encouragement to write some articles answering questions that you might have about kids on a boat or women who sail. We both can't wait to see what you have to say in the comments. And if you have a great sailing story and want to participate in an interview like this one to tell your story, let me know at comments at practical-sailor.com.